Hi there, I'm Jack. Today I'm going to show you how to create responsive design in p5.js. Let's get started. So first of all, open your p5 web editor and let's first create a couple of simple design element and then try to place it. So first of all, I would start with a circle. And let's say I want to put the circle at the center. Yeah, I missed the diameter. I want to put a small circle at the center, maybe something around 200 as the diameter. So we have a circle at the center, right? So now let's say we want to change our canvas for whatever reason. You see the circle is not in the center anymore. And then what if we change the circle to 600? Again, it's not in the center. So how can we create a design so that the circle always stay in the center? So one simple way is that we can use width and height and then use and do calculations on width and height and then use these values as the parameters for circle. So in this case, I'm using width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. Let me tidy code so it's a little easier to read. In this case, because I am using width, which is always the width of the entire canvas, height, which always had the value of the height of the entire canvas. So this time, if I change the width and height of the canvas, the design stays the same. It's always stay at the center. So that's how you can create a responsive positioning. So let's say we also want the size to be responsive. We want the size to be responsive to the size of the canvas. What can we do then? Of course, you can use a similar method where I can replace 200 with height divided by 2. And in that case, if I change height to be smaller, it becomes smaller to nicely fit in the design. But what if I change the width to be smaller but height stay the same? In this case, it still doesn't fit. So how does it adapt to both the width and height? So we can create a reference variable like so. So const reference size. Let's say that is going to be the smaller one of the width or height. So min, width, or height. This will give us the minimum value, which is a smaller value between the width and height. And then instead of using height divided by 2, we can use ref size divided by 2. In this case, the circle is always, the diameter of the circle is always relative to the smaller size between the width and height. So this time, I can make the width even smaller. It becomes smaller. I can make the height smaller. And again, it's only referencing the smaller side. Make the width taller, maybe to 600. And it always stay relative to the smaller side of the canvas. So that's two things that we've done. And let's also further improve the readability by adding additional variables. So instead of using these width and height directly in the parameters, I can create a variable that's x and y, and then replace these with those variables. So now you can see that's x and y. And why don't we also create one for d for the diameter? I'm going to use ref size divided by 2 and change this to d. So this is both now responsive to the canvas size, and it's also more readable. So let's see what else can we do. Let's see. So one thing is, of course, this is already helpful that when the canvas is changing, what if we want our sketch to be automatically adapted to the size of the canvas, to the size of the window? In that case, we can use a special variable called window width and window height. As the name suggests, it will return, or the value will be replaced with the width and height of the window. So this time, whenever the window size is at a different size, and then if you refresh, it always stays at the center, and then it also resizes very nicely depending on the size of window. And right now, when it's at the corner, that's because there's like a minimum window size. Again, there's still something we can improve, which is now it only works whenever I refresh the page. What if I want the canvas to be automatically resizing based on the window? We can use a function called window resized. This function will be called whenever window is resized, as the name suggests. So whenever a window is resized, what do we want to do? We want to resize our canvas to the latest window width and window height. This way, we can finally interactively adjust the size of the window, and it's always going to fit perfectly at the center, both in terms of the width and the height. Let's save this version. So responsive design, circle at center. Yeah. And then what if we also want to create some other element? Let's say we want to create something maybe on the top left or top right corner and stay on top, so not necessarily something at the center. In that case, let's first create something that's on the top left. Let's say we want to create a rectangle. This time I'm going to create a new variable that's maybe I'll call it maybe I would revise my variable names. So instead of x, I'm going to call this center x. Instead of y, I'm going to call it center y. Again, that is to really use more descriptive variable names, so we know exactly what these numbers mean. And then let's say I want to create a element that's on the top left, so we can maybe say top left x equals to, let's say 10 pixels, and then top right x equals 10 pixels. And these and then top, excuse me, that should be top left y, 10 pixels. And then let's try to create this rectangle. When we use rectangle, by default, the x and y is referring to the top left corner of the rectangle. So then the next thing we need is the width and height. So top left width is, let's say, 100. And I'm going to replace this with top left height equals to maybe slightly bigger. Top left width and top left height. Typo here. Okay, perfect. So we have a element which is always on the top left, and then let's try to resize. It does stay on the top left, which is good. However, it doesn't resize. Let's say we want this visual element to resize as well. In this case, maybe I'll simply use proportion of, simply make it proportionate to the width and height. So what we can do is, let's say top left width. I'm going to be make it, let's say, 10% of the entire width of the canvas, and then the height will be also 10% of the height. So really depends on what you're trying to do here. This is an adaptive rectangle that adjusts its size based on the size of the window. If you want something like a square, for instance, then maybe you can then take the decision of which reference you want to use. Maybe I'm going to use the smaller side of the smaller one between the width and height. If that's the case, if that's what works for you, then instead of width and height divided by 10, we can do reference size divided by 10, reference size divided by 10. So we have a nice square. Again, as you resize, the square also resizes, and so now we have a responsive design on the top left. So now let's think about what about the edge, or what about the margin on the top left and top right, on the top and left side. Let's say if we want that to be responsive as well, again, it might be a good idea to use the smaller side as a reference. So ref size maybe divided by 20, ref size divided by 20. So as you resize, this the margin changes as well as the size of the rectangle. Maybe it's a little bit too small. I'm going to make this slightly bigger. Change this to 5. So we have rectangle on the top left. And similarly, let's create one for the top right. So I'm going to copy and paste this portion of the code. Maybe I'm going to add a little bit of space, again, to help with the readability. So I'm going to use this shortcut, Command D on Mac or Control D on PC. I'm going to, instead of top left, I'm going to call this top right. Of course, it's not going to work immediately because we just changed the name of the variable. This rectangle is still on the exact same spot as the rectangle we just created, which is just right on top of each other. But now we want this one to be on the right side. And what do? So that is really a matter of the x-axis. So instead of this current size, this should be the size, because it's a margin. It's really this a matter. This is the margin between the right side, which is the width, divided by this. And then because when we draw a rectangle, it's always on the top left corner by default. So we also need to, let's put it right here. We also need to use this to minus top right width. Before, we're going to have an error this way because we use this variable before we use that variable before it's initialized. So we're going to replace this. So now that rectangle should stay on the right corner, and always stay on the right corner, and it's now symmetrical. Yeah. So similarly, you can create design on the bottom left or bottom right, and I hope this is helpful. And let's rename this so when you refer to this later, it's easier to find. Center and rectangles, or let's say this is squares on top. So this is a really simple example of how you can create a responsive design in p5.js. Hope you find this helpful, and thank you for watching. Bye.